I'm Dru Stevenson, and this is for my Law and Economics seminar. And this video is part of our unit on institutional law and economics. And here we're going to be talking about Coase's theory of the firm as it applies to the institutions that are necessary or play a vital role in our economy and in our government. It's a useful lens for analyzing and thinking about the role that institutions play in our society. So let's dive in. So, at the beginning of this module about institutions, we talk about the importance of institutions for the economy and for our legal system. And usually, when economists talk about the vital role that institutions play, they're talking about the courts and the government in general. But the fact that contracts and business deals will actually be enforced by the courts. And if they weren't, then everybody would take advantage of everyone, and then everyone knowing that they would probably get taken advantage of would be hesitant to engage in any type of transactions or free market trading. And so the introduction to a unit on institutional law and economics will focus on how you can't really have free markets unless you have legal institutions that are going to enforce the agreements that private parties make and also enforce some basic rules against fraud. And so we have to have some sort of rule of law in order for markets to function properly. And that's great, but that whole focus is on government institutions and specifically government legal institutions like the courts and maybe regulatory agencies. But our society is full of other types of private institutions that play a vital role in our economy and our legal system. And in some of my videos, including this one, I want to talk about that. And here we're going to start by talking about the most common form of institution that we have in our society. So common that we take it for granted, but it didn't always exist. And I'm talking about the modern corporation or firm. So corporations or firms, and this could be a huge national company or conglomerate like ExxonMobil or General Electric or IBM or Google, or it could be a law firm. And so these are, in fact, institutions. So they're organizations, they have traditions and policies and institutional memory and a subculture, and a sense of identity, and so forth. And that's what we're going to discuss here. But I want you to take a moment and think about where you're going to work after graduation from law school. You're probably going to go to a law firm or to clerk for a judge in a courthouse. When a partner asks you to do something at a law firm, you don't start negotiating the price that you're going to charge for writing a memo or drafting a brief that the partner asks you to draft. You're just going to do it. They're actually just going to order you to do it. And so this brings up the question of why we have firms and the contradiction between firms and the free market. And this was a puzzle that Coase tackled as one of his big theories, besides the one that we usually call the Coase theorem. Now we're talking about his theory of the firm and how it applies to institutions. And costs are frictions, right? That require some sort of investment just to engage in free market commerce and trades. And so the first is search and information costs. Employers will spend a lot of time trying to fill positions, interviewing candidates, and it's very costly to do a talent search to fill higher up positions at firms. I don't know about you, but a lot of us hate buying cars or hate buying appliances or hate shopping for a new laptop. It can be overwhelming to decide which model and which features are best suited for you and fit in your price range, are going to meet your needs, or that you will be happiest with. Again, a household appliance like washers and dryers that you want to buy. Some people really enjoy this process, but for a lot of people, they dread the idea of having to go shopping for washers and dryers because their old one broke. And then once you get past the search and information costs, so now you're an informed shopper, you have bargaining costs. So you have to figure out how to negotiate prices and terms. And sometimes this might be a simple bartering thing. If you're buying a used item on the secondary market, you might haggle a little bit over the price. For some people, this is actually pretty stressful and a type of cost. There's people who would greatly prefer not to do that. And in fact, even institutional car dealerships will make you haggle over the price, haggle over what features are they're going to charge you for and what things are going to get thrown in for free, like leather seats or engraving the VIN number on the window of the car, all sorts of things like that. Whatever it is, we do have items, buying a residential home where people negotiate a lot. The next type of cost that Coase identified was enforcement and policing costs. So you order something online and you're exercising a certain amount of faith or taking a leap of faith that they're actually going to send it to you after you pay for it. And a lot of us have had the experience at some time or another of buying something online with our credit card and it never arrives, or it arrives and it's broken or damaged or not what the seller led us to believe it would be. And so that's a very simple example of enforcement and policing costs. But there's other things. You hire someone to mow your lawn, a lawn crew to come and do your landscaping or lawn work or outdoor work once a week. And the question is, what if you start to notice that you're not sure they're really coming every week, or the contractor came for 2 days and then they didn't show up on the third day? This is a very common complaint about contractors who come and do home renovations or things like that. And so checking on people, making them stay on task who you've hired to do things, or if you are the provider, making sure that people pay you for something that you sold them is a type of cost. So again, if you own a business or retail, every business owner has had problems with customers who bounced checks or bought on a payment plan and then never paid or things like that. So these types of enforcement and monitoring costs are friction in the economy. They're real costs that you incur just for being a market player. Our whole economy is built around this alternative of bringing things in house. And so this is the make or buy problem that faces firms. Once you have a firm, every new task, there's a question of should we outsource this, like data entry or maintaining our computer network, or should we hire an outside firm that's going to come in and, let's say, do our personnel accounting or our accounts receivable and payable or things like that? Should we conduct our own talent search when we need to hire a new manager? Or should we hire an outside headhunter company or search company that will interview people and find us some good candidates, at least to interview, that are finalists or something like that? Coase had a technical term for this. He called it the firm as supersession. The firm as an institution, he said, was designed to avoid the cost of the market because it's cheaper to just give orders to your subordinates than it is to bargain over every task that needs to be done when you are running a commercial enterprise. So you could, if you're an entrepreneur, outsource all of your legal work to different lawyers. So you could hire someone to do your contract review, you could hire another lawyer to handle your lawsuits and litigation, and so forth. So if you have a firm, and this could be a law firm or any other type of business or corporation, instead of negotiating 1,000 little contracts a day for every task that needs to be done, the move this box or drive that forklift and or type this email, we make one big contract that's usually a renewable annual contract. The employee agrees to obey the employer's directions within limits in exchange for a fixed wage, and the employer buys essentially the right to direct. This is the key takeaway that you should get from this video. Do we hire outside counsel or do we have our in-house team handle it? And the smart answer is it's going to depend on transaction costs. If the task is complex and specific and hard to monitor, it might be better to do it in-house. But this is why sometimes the corporate executives who earn the highest compensation are supposed to be very talented at making these types of decisions. What types of things do we outsource? What types of things do we do in-house? Again, I want you to remember that if we're going to have an institution like a firm, we could go to the extremes. We could outsource everything and have one person who's a doing business as a one person for a solo practitioner who outsources everything. Or we could have a firm that outsources nothing. They do everything in-house, everything. And most firms are somewhere in the middle. Now, I got to flip this around and ask the contrary question. If firms are so efficient, why isn't the whole world just one giant company? Why hasn't every airline combined and every telecom company combined and every computer company combined and so forth? And part of this is a legal answer that we have antitrust laws that that are anti-monopoly laws that try to prevent this type of market consolidation. But there are also market forces that discourage institutions from getting too big. And I want you to be aware of that. And the idea is that at some point, expansion yields diminishing marginal returns to the management. In other words, as the firm gets bigger, there's this initial savings, right? That you don't have to transact over every task. You don't have to hire a gig worker to do every little thing. You have a staff who's right there waiting for assignments. And that's very efficient if you have the ability to keep them busy. But at some point, as you scale that up, you hit a threshold where these internal transaction costs start to escalate or spiral upwards too. In other words, you get bureaucracy, you get a corporation or an organization or a large nonprofit, a religious denomination, let's say, that's so big and growing so fast and sprawling that there's information loss, right? That there's communication breakdowns with the leadership. So it becomes harder and harder for the CEO to know what the janitor is doing, in a sense. So Coase came up with a formula saying that a firm will grow until the cost of organizing one more transaction inside the firm equals the cost of doing it outside in the market. I'm going to say that again. Coase had a formula for his theory of the firm that firms will continue to grow. They will expand as they bring more tasks in-house and add to their staff until they reach the point where they have so many people, they're so big that adding any more staff or bringing more tasks inside the firm would be just as costly as outsourcing it. And at that point, we're going to get a break and there's going to be a leveling off of the firm's expansion. I want you to understand that this creates sort of a natural growth cap for a lot of institutions in our society. I've been talking about firms, but this also applies to nonprofits, to healthcare providers like hospitals, to mega churches, to humanitarian agencies, museums, and art galleries, and things like that. So here's our conclusion or takeaway. Institutions aren't random. They're solutions to the problem of transaction costs and different types of transaction costs, search and information costs, bargaining costs, and enforcement and monitoring costs, and to some extent, switching costs if you decide that you don't like someone's work and then you have to switch to someone else. We have private institutions that make up a lot of the institutions in our society. They function as institutions, right? They create stability and predictability. They provide valuable signals. You can get better market branding and things like that. You have corporate subcultures. People can go and have a career in a company and get skills and form relationships and have a sense of loyalty to their company and develop specialization and so forth that are harder to do if you have just an endless network of independent contractors. It's important to understand that as we understand the vital role that institutions play in our economy. So that wraps up my video about institutions and institutional law and economics. Thanks for watching.